Okay, so I think this will be the first presentation on multimodal supply chains today, or multimodal anyway. I will try to start with focusing on the innovations, actual innovations. I had prepared also a speech of like 45 minutes, so I'll be going quickly here and there. First, I want to go through these innovations, what are they? And I want to start on the demand side with mass individualized logistics services. Also explain how this relates to network integration and synchronization. We have a Dutch word called synchromodality. I'll explain what it is, and also how it relates to transport technology eventually. And then there's the accelerator of these things, which is the digitalization, logistics planning and operations. Three implications that I want to project ahead is that multimodality does provide opportunities for network integration and some effects on network resilience that we have done some quantitative studies here that I will explain. And there are some preconditions here of ICT systems and transport technology that have to be met. So multimodality in a normal situation, in a business as usual situation, is close to being not feasible. It has a very low share in Europe in transport, but maybe in situations of stress it might be the way to survive. And then I'll end with some ideas on balancing efficiency and resilience, or trading them off, as we said today. Thank you. So, well, this is a slide I can go through very quickly. It's the context in which I want to start the story of globalization and basically all global or supply chains being global, and or demand networks, as I should say after Professor Christopher's talk. In my lectures, I always tell students that there are 4 types of product along these axes, and they all have different types of supply chains behind them. The world is slowly moving from long lead time standard products to customized products with a short lead time. And as we move in that direction, the emphasis is changing on what we will require from supply chains in terms of technology, in terms of modes, even modes of transport. Now, this is all driven by increasing customer needs, and also driven by the opportunity that digitization provides us. But companies cannot do this because it's a very expensive step to make if you want to serve customers better and more responsively with short lead times, customized products, if they don't save costs on the other side of the coin. And this is the story of collaboration as I see it. So collaboration allows this mass individualization to take place, or it enables it. So companies have, through the decades, have done their best to make their supply chains more and more lean. But we're slowly getting at the end of this potential, and companies are starting to find ways to collaborate. Now, this can happen through horizontal collaboration at the operation level, or through increased outsourcing, and we're seeing both, of course. And crowdsourcing perhaps is the next level. So an example of this, and this is also a story about, it's quite an old case, but it's the story also of what is required from companies in their supply chains if they want to do this. Of course, collaboration cannot be done for all the products, because collaboration will slow everything down. So typically what a company will want to do is to split its channels into a hybrid system where the peaky patterns are separated from the slow going on the stream of regular shipments. And we did a case study like this for beer products and for fast-moving consumer goods in the Netherlands. And I think Frans Grijssen is with the company now, where the person who did his PhD here went to eventually the Argus Eye company. And this is was one of his pictures, where the base of the work was the problem of a company: how do I split my flows in a way that I can collaborate? And this is not trivial. So for companies, this is a huge step to make, and this is, I think, why it's taking so long that we can see the real benefits of collaboration. We'll be having one of the big workshops soon in the Alice Working Group 4 on collaboration on this problem. So this is also a slide to show how it's playing at a global scale with reconfiguration happening from flows from China to Europe, where, of course, the classical role of a hub as Rotterdam would be to decompose flows coming from China in towards different final destinations. And I will not explain the detailed chain configurations at the left, but it's obvious that if this split is being made in China, if they have full containers that they can ship to, let's say, Sweden, Norway, or Spain, they will do that. An intermediate situation is with a warehouse, say, in the Ukraine. We are seeing a diversification in these kinds of configurations now, which will all influence the speed at which collaboration is going. And if companies are able to do that, they're also able to provide better services and to speed up the products towards the consumer. Now, this collaboration is enabled by decreasing transaction costs also, not just by splitting the flows within a company, but also by allowing the companies to communicate together. And there's a strong link here with what we call the physical internet. This is the emerging and compelling vision of Benoît Montreuil and Eric Ballot from Paris. And Benoît is now Georgia Tech. They developed this vision like 10 years ago, maybe 2010, I think, was the first publication about this, where it combines the idea of very strong modularization, so increased standardization, technical standardization, with very low transaction cost. It's an analogy to the digital internet, and it sort of takes the idea of a forwarder, which is global and which is open and not proprietary even. So how does this work? With increased digitalization, of course, the marginal cost of communication will go to zero, and this will not constrain the number of partners in a network anymore, and so theoretically it will lead to a partnership of all companies being in the same network, operating together, collaborating. Well, this is an end state, and as we're going in that direction, of course, we'll be seeing new and new configurations. Let me advertise for the next Physical Internet Conference, the 5th one in Groningen, in beautiful Groningen in the Netherlands in June, where we will have an international crowd. We'll have like 200 to 300 people coming, discuss the latest developments of the physical internet. You're welcome to join. So this is, I think, the new paradigm, although it's not yet scrutinized a lot. I think there's a handful of publications out there which explain what the physical internet is doing. We're still taking it as a leading vision for innovation programs in Europe. So, big question here is also how much innovation or how much improvement potential is there. So the average policymaker in Europe in transportation has in its mind that the rate of utilization of trucks is 43%. That's what the Eurostat statistics tell them. It's like 20% of the flows is empty, and the other 80%, half of it is utilized. So overall, it's like around 40%. Now this is measured in weight terms. So even though the policymaker will think that if you fill the other half of the truck, we're there, if you measure it in cubic meters or in square meters, you'll end up with much higher figures. And so we did for the Netherlands as a pilot because we have these data. Many countries don't have this data. So the graph on the right shows the green and the red bars. Sorry for those that are colorblind. If you compare them with the blue bars, you'll see that they're much higher. So depending on the product, it might go to 70, 80, 90%. So it's up to a level of utilization above which you will not want to go if you don't want to lose all your resilience. And so if we look at this, then we can collaborate all what we want, but the assets will not be utilized much better than they are now. I mean, this is a story for trucks, of course. We can also go beyond one mode and go into rail and waterways, which is where the multimodal story comes in. So there are a lot of technological innovations that do not necessarily play into this multimodality thing. They're mode specific. We, the Dutch, are very proud of having beaten MIT with our Hyperloop version system in the test, and we're also very proud with our solar vehicle to have beaten everyone else in Australia. Now, there are a lot of things around, of course, autonomous shipping, platooning, and it's tough to say whether these will be good or bad for resilience. It's even tough to say whether they will be good or bad for transportation. They're happening. It's technology which is coming around. And the business cases sometimes are still very weak, while there is a lot of attention, a lot of money going into it. So, summarizing some innovation directions in transport technology, we can group these into 3 directions of innovation. One is autonomy. Well, we see a lot of automation going on. This is in transition, and it's a very complicated transition because there will not be a change from a point to that no one is automated to the point that everyone is automated. So we'll be stuck with a mixed regime for 2 or 3 decades. And the question is, how will this be dealt with? But it's not something that will necessarily be good or bad for multimodality. We'll phase out the human factor more and more. I think that's an important point, which may have an effect on resilience by mode. The second direction is integration. This is where multimodality will become important. But as I said, it's under regular conditions, it's not really feasible. Transshipment is very expensive, and disruption risk or disruption problems are not yet part of the business models here. And the third is propulsion, which is mostly driven by the energy transition. It will depend on how this energy transition goes, how successful this will be. Sometimes these are combined into new systems, but we have to look at each individual influence instead of the combined modalities. So if we look at what it means for the transport network, it's about integration. Then in the case of the Netherlands, we have waterways, quite a decent system, a rail and a road. And one of our students did a study into resilience for this network. And he looked at very simply at how many links he can take out of the network before the network starts to collapse. So different terms measured in the number of challenges before the networks become disconnected. And he looked at an important freight corridor from Rotterdam to Duisburg to near the Rhine River, a very important hub in the hinterland in Germany. And he came up with a very interesting finding. So what he did was first test the networks individually and then test them combined. And you'll see from left to right, you'll see all these bars where the height of the bars, the green triangles, show the number of challenges per 100 kilometer of infrastructure before the network is disconnected. So as the bars go up, they become more resilient or more robust, the networks. And the third from the left is the road network, and the third from the right is the 3 or 2 networks, waterways and road combined with terminals. And you'll see that the right figure is higher than the low one. It's almost twice as high. So by just connecting these networks with some terminals, the resilience of the entire network doubles. And it means that you have many more options. There's redundancy suddenly, which was not there. With a relatively small investment, you create a much stronger network. I think it's these kind of studies that we need to look at to understand the value of multimodality in a disruptive situation. So I think that we can extend this to European networks and also look at the TransEuropean networks. So we have these corridors in Europe, 9, and they all have their individual corridor manager and their individual budget, but it's nowhere near a network still. It's not like this metro type of, subway type of network you see on the right. So if somebody comes from China, say over the One Belt, One Road, then if you rise in Turkey, then how will you get from Turkey to Rotterdam? You'll have to cross 4 corridors at least, with their own corridor manager, with their own regime, their own funding, and so on and so on. So this interconnectivity and interoperability at the European level is still not there. And the hubs now are just, the corridors are quite broad, just as the Dutch corridor I showed, and these are not yet well defined in terms of freight. One of the initial problems, of course, is that the 10T was designed for passengers, not for freight. So and I always picture this with a tent. It's almost like the 10T when you have the poles are the hubs which are holding up the tent. You know, if you don't have the hubs in the middle, you don't have a network. You don't have a tent. So what we're doing now in ALICE is trying to, ALICE is the European technology platform for logistics in Europe. The European Commission has like, I think 30 technology platforms in all areas of science, and logistics is one of them. And we developed the R&D agenda with business, so with industry, with government, and with the academic experts. So we're trying to create this more integrated intermodal system that we call the synchro model system because it's synchronized. And you could call this structural flexibility. So with the combined modes, you're able to switch whenever it's needed from one mode to another. And even if transshipment is expensive, if disruptions or vulnerability, or let's call it resistance or robustness, has a price, then it may become feasible. It's already being done in certain niches where it is feasible, but overall across the whole European network, it's still growing, it's emerging. So we're looking at the interfaces between supply networks, the supply chains, and the transport services network, and the interfaces between the transport services and the infrastructure network. So the 10T are on the lower level. The middle level are the new logistics service providers that provide flexible services across modes of transport. And the upper level are the shippers who have to reorganize their supply chains. And this is an R&D roadmap which is now available and which is also already being used by the European Commission to write the programs for Horizon 2020. So this is the structural flexibility that is potentially there, but is not yet valued. So one of the benefits, and here's another Pareto Frontier, which is slightly different, which shows that by integrating these modes of transport, you will expand the frontier because of the availability of switching options. And we recently, I think it's a week ago or 10 days ago, we had a PhD defense of the guy who pioneered synchromodality in the Netherlands, who was working for ECT, the container terminal. They do about 100,000 containers a week. And they have created a new company that does this synchromodal transport service. They look at these options, and for every container, they decide where it should go without the client having dictated beforehand which mode should be chosen. And they're developing new business propositions, which is quite unique in this industry, that they say there's a primary product, or sorry, a prime service, and there is a basic service. So they don't say you have to pay extra, but they say you can pay less if you don't dictate which mode we will choose, and if you somehow release the conditions for delivery. Then the accelerator behind this are these information flows, because also in this case of synchromodality, information is crucial. Now I'll give a bottle of wine for anyone who spots the physical flows in this whole figure within a minute. Yeah, most of them are information flows. The physical flows are only a few. So whenever we start to think about reorganizing something like this, we have to think of information, because that's the main barrier. And this is also what's behind this physical internet idea, that reducing the marginal cost of communication to zero will make a difference here as well. And how does this work? Now, digitalization as a technology, actually ICT, the revolution, has gone through a series of mini revolutions that are all worthwhile to have a look at, because we can all recognize the applications of these mini revolutions in our logistics world. So firstly, it's about computing power, yeah? Being able to make quick calculations, about size of computers, from sort of room magnitude to wearables. It's about automation, being able to do something without explicit instructions from a human. It's about ubiquity, that these information systems are everywhere. It's about artificial intelligence, allowing us to do advanced analytics. Collaborative computing, that our capacity increases enormously in the cloud. Digitalization of administration. Many things we call blockchain now are nothing more than digitizing administration. Data availability, that suddenly I can get access to your data, so if we cooperate, we become stronger. Data governance, that we have institutions that have a look at how this is used. And distributed systems, where we govern this together. Yeah, this is, I think, the blockchain is the culmination of many of these things. And they each individually have found application or are finding application in multimodal transport through a mix of the physical world and the digital world with new business models, and it's the recognition of this customer value and the proper business process redesign that releases this value. So I think this digitalization is really progressing by small steps, and I think the industry is doing its best to adopt it with leaps and bounds. And we'll see in this kind of pictures where I show how the control loop is developing for companies, because that's basically what it is. If you can sense, you know what the current situation is, and you can act on it by changing instructions, by automating decisions. And there are many propositions like analytics as a service, or control towers, or increased situational awareness, which all have an explicit value. And what they eventually will mean is that we will be moving out from a situation where we predict and where we make decisions for long term ahead, towards a situation where we continuously make automated decisions and learn from them. So it's a control loop which is increasing in speed. And the advanced analytics and advanced monitoring, the advanced decision-making systems in freight transport and logistics, they are all heading towards operational decision-making, so that tactical decision-making, strategic decision-making will become less important. So in other words, you can plan all you want, but it's all about realization. And the logistics managers know this. I mean, they work every day to realize things despite what has been planned. So planning is becoming less important, and this function of operational steering is being strengthened as these systems become more professional. So this is the slide I like the most of them all, which is a summary of the headaches of a forwarder, like in this case FedEx, where on every single proposition that they have, there are already one or two startups preparing to fight them. And altogether, it means that there's a very strong disintermediation going on. Yeah? So transparency or intransparency, of course, is the basis of the forwarder's business. And well, they can choose to become transparent, but then they will go out of business, and others are doing it for them. So it's a very interesting world to see how this will be changing. The physical internet, I think, is part of this story, where we will not know anymore who's treating our freight, but we'll just have to guarantee that it will happen well. So an interesting report was from the World Economic Forum, where they sum up the benefits, the business benefits and the social benefits of all these innovations. And it's interesting to have a look at the numbers, not because of the numbers per se, but because of the patterns inside. So if you look at the new business value, the cost reduction, which is the other side of the coin, and emission and congestion, the external impacts, then the focus of these impacts is on collaboration. So look at control towers, for example, trade facilitation, yeah? And it's on control, or even crowdsourcing is also about collaboration. And control, so data analytics, this is all about controlling the system in a much more operational way, and control towers as well. So the bulk of these impacts are about collaboration and about control. The external cost reduction is limited. There are even negative effects of increased trade facilitation. And there's nothing is said about distributive effects. So will this go at the cost of SMEs or not? Or will there be strengthened oligopoly? Will there be a convergence of big industries? That's not really clear. And of course there's a disclaimer to all these kinds of calculations, but I thought the patterns were quite interesting to share. And the main direction of all these technological innovations then is to allow everybody to collaborate, and individually companies to speed up their operational control cycle. So summarizing and also looking at resilience, I can see at least two critical links for resilience. One which is working through the rate of utilization or efficiency, reducing the slack in the system and therefore reducing resilience. So although it says a plus, you have to look at it in like a system dynamics term. So more slack means more resilience, less slack means less resilience. So if utilization degree goes up, then resilience goes down. And skill itself will increase. Yeah, so we see the mega ships and so on, they decrease, that decreases resilience as well. And then there are a lot of other arrows here, a lot of other relationships where the outcome is not so clear. And so there are many links that could mitigate this risk with the red lines, but the balance of the two is unclear. So I still want to hang on a little bit to the word balancing, because there might be an opportunity to balance here the risks that we have. So concluding, the main service innovation here is, I think, towards the customer, mass individualized logistic services, and the rest are just supporting innovations. Network integration, synchronization, they allow the cost savings that will pay for this. The transport technologies and the ICT applications are the ones that support this. And network integration is going towards more operational terms, facilitating structural flexibility and synchromodality. The transport technologies, there, I think that the integration challenge, the problem there is that the efficiency impact is not there. So nobody really wants to go into modality at a large scale, while it can be critical for resilience. And ICT is the accelerator as it reduces the marginal cost of communication. So overall, there are many claims for impacts of innovation, including blockchain, drones, you name it, but there's very little evidence for a balance of efficiency versus resilience improvement. Thank you.